What if the worst thing about a warning is that no one ever believes you're getting one? Mine came as sound. A thin, high note that lived somewhere behind my eyes, and it only ever showed up right before something broke. I was 7 the first time. Cereal turning to paste in the bowl, my mother telling me to hurry up and eat, and this whine building in my skull like a mosquito trapped in a jar. I told her my ears hurt. She told me to finish breakfast. 60 minutes later, my brother came off the top of the swing set wrong and snapped his arm in 2 places, and the second he hit the ground, the noise cut out like someone had pulled a plug. After that, I kept score. It rang the morning our dog bolted into traffic. It rang the week my dad got laid off. It rang the night before my grandmother's heart gave out. It never once told me what, or where, or how bad, just that something was coming, close enough to touch. I grew up as the kid who wouldn't get in the car, who begged everyone to stay home on days that looked completely normal. My family filed it under nerves. I learned that explaining myself only made people look at me sideways, so I stopped. By adulthood, I'd built a whole private ritual around it. Check the stove twice, don't step off curbs, call the people I love just to hear their voice. Most of the time, nothing came of it because most disasters are small ones. I never told a soul. Try explaining that a sound in your head has a warning system better than the Weather Channel. Then I started a new job at a design studio. And on day 1, I shook hands with a man named Owen. And the ringing started and didn't stop. Not once in over 20 years had it stuck around like that. It always came, did its damage, and left. Now it lived in the room with him. Faint when he was across the floor, sharp enough to blur my vision the second he leaned over my desk. I told myself it was new job stress. But I sat 10 feet from a man my entire nervous system was screaming about, and I couldn't make the two things fit. So I watched him instead. Owen brought donuts on Fridays. He was the first person in the building who bothered to learn my name and actually used it. None of that touched the ringing. If anything, the nicer he was, the louder it got. And for 2 weeks, I convinced myself the sound had sniffed out something rotten hiding behind a good face. Then the accidents started stacking up. A shelf came loose from the wall above his desk and missed his skull by a foot. He caught his shoe on a cord by the copier and cracked his wrist on a table edge. His car got clipped in the lot while he sat at his desk, nowhere near it. Every time the ringing arrived first. Every time I said nothing because what do you even say? Excuse me, my head makes noise around you. The truth clicked into place sideways. The sound wasn't warning me about Owen. It was warning me about what kept happening to him. It had locked onto him because someone, had it out for him, and it wanted me close enough to do something about it. So I stopped keeping distance and started closing it on purpose, which is a strange kind of discipline, walking toward the exact thing your whole body is telling you to run from. 3 weeks in, we were on the sidewalk waiting for a lunch table when Owen stepped to the curb to take a call, and the ringing jumped from a whine to something closer to a scream. I didn't think. I grabbed the back of his jacket and hauled him backward, and we both went down hard on the pavement half a second before a car jumped the curb and hit the restaurant front at the exact spot where he'd been standing. Driver had blacked out at the wheel. Glass everywhere, people shouting, and in the middle of it, my head went completely silent, same as the moment my brother hit the dirt. Owen sat up next to me and asked how I knew. I was tired of lying, so I told him everything. He didn't laugh. He didn't pull away. He said he believed me, and I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. 4 days later, the ringing came back sharper, almost irritated, like it resented me assuming we were finished. So I started staying late. Not every night, just enough. Sitting at my desk once the hallway lights dimmed to evening mode, studying whatever had changed in the room. Under the wall bracket above Owen's desk, my phone light caught fresh gouges around the screw heads, the kind you get prying something loose with a flathead. The building manager mentioned that shelf had been remounted the day before it fell, and that cord, zip-tied to the baseboard since before I'd even started, had been pulled loose directly into Owen's morning path. I photographed all of it and showed him at lunch. His face went from confused to very still. That's when he told me what he'd been sitting on. He'd just been handed the lead on the studio's biggest account. A coworker named Hamilton had wanted it badly, had shaken his hand for the cameras, and barely spoken to him since. I knew Hamilton the way you know someone who's always somewhere in the background of the office photo. 6 years at the studio, organizer of the birthday lunches, universally liked. 2 days later, he showed up at my desk with 2 coffees and easy small talk, leaned on my cubicle wall like we went way back. The second he got within 5 feet, the ringing spiked hard enough that I had to grip my desk to stay upright. I smiled, took the coffee, said my weekend was quiet. He talked printer toner for 3 minutes and was genuinely charming, and if my skull hadn't been on fire, I probably would have liked him too. That's when I learned the sound had a second setting. It didn't just tell me something was coming. It told me who was carrying it. I called Owen that night and laid it out flat. He said Hamilton was competitive, not dangerous, and I could hear him wanting that to be true. He needed more than a hunch, and honestly, he was right to ask for it. So I found Lucinda, who ran project management and had put in nearly as many years as Hamilton. Quiet, watchful, more listener than talker. I told her everything except the ringing itself, the bracket, the cord, the way Hamilton stayed exactly as late as Owen did. She heard the whole thing without interrupting, then told me plainly that if I walked into the boss's office with a scratched bracket and a loose cord, I'd be the one cleaning out my desk by Friday. She wasn't being cruel. She was being accurate. He had 6 years of goodwill, I had 4 months. If he was really doing this, she said, he'd do it again. And the only thing that mattered now was being ready with proof nobody could argue away. The next evening, once the building emptied out, I opened Owen's project folder. Not his email. Not anything personal, just the drawings. 50 clean pages, and then, buried on page 3 of the structural set, a measurement shaved a fraction off spec. File history. Edited at 10:45 p.m. 2 nights earlier under Hamilton's login. Page 7, another number nudged. Page 12, a material swapped for something that looked nearly identical and would fail under real scrutiny. 3 quiet landmines dropped into a 50-page package, timed so Owen would present it, the client's engineers would find the flaws, and Hamilton would be sitting 2 rows back shaking his head, ready to step in. I fixed all 3 and said nothing yet. One night of edits proves nothing. I needed it to happen twice. Next morning, Hamilton appeared at my cubicle, arms crossed, and said, almost like a joke, that I'd been watching him. The ringing hit so hard I felt it in my back teeth. I played dumb. He tilted his head, said sure I did, and added that people who see things that aren't there tend to make everyone else nervous. Time just long enough to make sure I understood it wasn't friendly advice. He walked off. That was the part that scared me most. Repeated to anyone else, it would sound like a concerned colleague. He knew exactly how to make a threat survive being quoted. I sat in my car afterward with my head against the wheel. Same helpless feeling from age 7. Owen half believed me. Lucinda had already told me what fighting this would cost. And the ringing wasn't coming and going anymore. It sat behind my eyes constantly now, like pressure ahead of a storm. I got to Lucinda before anyone else arrived the next day and told her what I wanted to try. A lightweight screen recorder on Owen's machine, active only after hours, pulling in the laptop camera if the lid stayed open. She warned me it was a real risk. Traced back, it would end both our jobs. But she agreed we needed the proof, and if I was wrong, we'd wipe it and never speak of it again. We set it up together that night. 2 nights later, alone in my apartment, hands shaking so badly I mistyped my password twice. I watched 6 hours of a dark screen until 11:03 p.m., when the glow came up and lit Hamilton's face. He sat in Owen's chair, opened the project folder, and changed 3 numbers. 15 minutes, start to finish, then the lid closed and he was gone. I copied it to 2 drives. One stayed with me, one went in a drawer, and slept better than I had in a month. I walked in the next morning and knew instantly something had gone wrong. Low voices by the coffee machine, eyes cutting toward the boss's door. Owen pulled me aside, ashen, and told me Hamilton had reported unauthorized software on his workstation, a security violation, and it looked like it was on Owen. Hamilton had found the recorder mid-edit, and, instead of quietly deleting it, had carried it straight to management and pinned it on Owen. The thing I'd built to protect him had become the weapon used against him. Owen asked quietly if it had been me. I'd promised myself I was done lying, so I nodded. He looked at the ceiling for a second, said I should have told him, and disappeared into that office for 40 minutes. When he came out, he walked past me without a word. Later, standing by his chair, I told him the footage had caught Hamilton red-handed. He kept his eyes on the screen and said I'd gone behind his back, installed something on his machine without asking. And how was that any different from what Hamilton did? I didn't have an answer that would have helped either of us. I locked myself in the bathroom at lunch and realized from the mirror I'd been crying at my desk without noticing. Lucinda knocked, took one look, and asked if I'd saved the footage before IT wiped the machine. I held up the drive between 2 fingers, and she let out a breath she'd clearly been holding all morning. Then she said the thing that changed our whole plan. We couldn't take it to the boss. Hamilton had already planted the story, unauthorized software on Owen's machine, and showing up with footage from that same software would only confirm it. He'd poisoned the well on purpose. We needed a different stage entirely. Somewhere Hamilton would have to answer in real time, in front of the client, the boss, and the whole team, with no chance to get to anyone first. That evening, I drove to Owen's apartment and stood outside his door for 5 minutes before knocking. He opened it halfway and just waited. I told him Hamilton had sabotaged his files, that I had the footage, that presenting those drawings unchecked would cost him everything. He asked why he should believe me. Not unkindly, just honestly. I held up the drive and told him I'd never lied to him, not even when the truth sounded insane. He stepped back and let me in. We watched it together on his couch. Dark screen, then 11:03, then Hamilton's face in the glow. Owen didn't blink through any of it. When it ended on the empty chair, he asked how long this had been going on. So I told him everything. The bracket, the cord, the edits I'd quietly fixed and never mentioned, the coffee, the doorway threat, Partway through, his hand started to shake, small and involuntary, his body understanding before his mind caught up. He said he'd thought Hamilton was his friend. Not really to me, more to the version of Hamilton he'd been carrying around for 2 years. Then he closed the laptop and asked what we were going to do. What we did was let the studio's own records speak. Lucinda had access to the file tracking system that timestamps every edit with a login. During the client review, at a moment Owen chose, she'd pull the edit history up on the big screen. No accusations, just the data, sitting there in front of everyone. Owen turned it over for a long time, weighing whether this was justice or just another version of going behind someone's back. Eventually he said, if we're doing this, we do it clean. Just the record, nothing else. We called Lucinda and she had it ready by morning. The night before the review, I stayed late finishing the layout and didn't hear Hamilton come up behind me. You fixed the files again, he said. No warmth in it this time. He leaned in close enough that I could see the vein at his temple and said I thought I was helping Owen, but I was only making things worse for myself, that he'd been there far longer than I had. The ringing sat in my jaw and behind my eyes. I didn't flinch. I told him if he knew those files so well, he shouldn't have any trouble explaining the edit history in the morning. Something in his face cracked for half a second, and underneath it wasn't anger. It was fear. Then it sealed shut and he straightened his cuff and walked off like we'd been discussing the weather. The conference room filled at 9. The boss with his coffee, 2 team leads, a laptop propped up for the client on the line. Hamilton came in last, sat in the second row, arms folded, legs stretched out. A man already certain how the story ends. My phone buzzed under the table. Drop it or I tell everyone you're the one sabotaging Owen's work. Who do you think they'll believe? The new girl with no history or me? The ringing narrowed to one clean high note, like a fork struck against glass, and I understood, finally, that this room was the thing it had been warning me about all along. Not the car. Not the shelf. This, Owen opened steady, voice even, hands still, walking the client through drawings I'd personally checked twice over. Halfway through, he paused and asked Lucinda to bring up the file history. 2 clicks, and the screen filled with columns. Dates, logins, every change made to the project in 3 weeks. And sitting in the middle of it, unmistakable. 11:03. 11:19, 11:41, every entry tied to Hamilton's account, each one matching a corrupted measurement in the structural set. The room went the kind of quiet where people forget to breathe. The boss set his coffee down without looking at it. Hamilton said, too fast and too loud, that those weren't his edits. Someone must have used his login. Owen didn't argue. He just let the screen do the talking. When the boss asked for an explanation, Hamilton scrambled through something about stolen passwords and 6 years of loyalty. Scanning the table for one sympathetic face and finding none, that's when I said it out loud, that the recorder on Owen's workstation had also caught the laptop camera. Lucinda clicked once more. A grainy still. Hamilton in Owen's chair at 11 at night, face lit blue by the screen, hands on the keys. He shot up so fast his chair hit the wall. He pointed at me, said I'd planted the software, called it entrapment. The boss raised one hand, the universal signal for stop, and there was something final in his voice that landed on the whole room. Hamilton didn't sit. He turned away from the boss and looked straight at me instead, and his voice cracked. Not with anger, but something worse. 6 years, he said. 6 years, and they hand the lead to someone who's been here 5 minutes. He said he'd built half the templates Owen still used. Said he'd stayed late for 3 straight years cleaning up other people's mistakes so the studio could hit its deadlines, and no one had ever once said thank you. Nobody moved. And I felt the ringing finally start to recede. Not cut off this time, but pull back like a tide. What surfaced underneath it caught me off guard. Pity. Not for what he'd done. What he'd done could have cracked Owen's skull open on the floor under that shelf. But he wasn't standing there as a monster. He was a man who'd spent years being invisible and had chosen the ugliest possible way to finally be seen. Owen walked toward him, stopped a few feet away, and said quietly that he would have helped him. All he ever had to do was ask. A tear slid down Hamilton's face and he didn't wipe it away. He sat back down slowly, hands on his knees, eyes on the floor, and said nothing else. The boss asked everyone but Hamilton to step out. We filed into the hallway the way you leave a room where something has happened that you haven't fully processed yet. Owen caught up with me and asked again how I knew. I gave him the same 5 words as before. My ears rang. He said he was glad I'd listened. I walked outside into the afternoon sun and stood on the sidewalk listening. There was nothing there. Through the window, I could still see the conference room. Owen's chair turned toward the screen, nobody bothering to push it back in.